Hello and welcome back to another edition of ESPN Scrum Reset. Sam Bruce and Christy Doran in the Schmidt House. Christy, after, I think, the greatest Wallabies victory, certainly in my lifetime. People are calling it one of the greatest ever. Hello to you, mate. Where does it rank for you?
Bloody good to join you this morning. It's raining out there, but I'll tell you what, that to me, I tweeted with 10 minutes to go when the Wallabies were clearly going to win that. They scored another try, that it was the greatest performance. And I said of all time. And the reason why I say that is the great World Cup teams, clearly sometimes, that trumps it in terms of result, in terms of the standing of it, the international tournament nature of it. But for a comeback like that, for a side of where it is, in the context of where the Wallabies have been over the past decade, it is the best performance I've seen. It is remarkable what they did there. And be 22-0 down after as many minutes, the composure to get back 22 at 5, like this didn't just happen in a hot second in a 15-minute period. It was 60 minutes of brilliant rugby.
Now, we've had a little bit of fun at ESPN this morning. Some punters might have seen it on our Instagram page, I think, as well, if you're on that platform. Is rugby back in Australia, Christy? It's a question we're going to come back to later in this pod, because we've got to dig into this game and pick it apart, because just some of the stats around it are incredible. I mean, ending a 62-year drought in Johannesburg, 15-year drought in South Africa, full stop. You mentioned the 22-0 scoreline, 38 unanswered points. It's extraordinary, the context around this. And I was asked this morning, is it the greatest win that you can remember? And for me, it has gone past that one Neil's kick there in 2000, Bledisloe, over in New Zealand, when nobody kicked the Wallabies to victory after the siren. That remains the greatest single moment, I think, for me. But this game, this victory, the context around it, as you said, where the Wallabies have been, to be down by that margin early doors, it's nothing short of incredible.
Yeah, and the tries, weren't they spectacular? Like, this wasn't just rolling maws. It was everything that David Campese, and dare I say his name at the moment.
We'll come back to Campo again as well.
Everything that he would have loved in a game of a rugby coached by Joe Schmidt. Spectacular. It was New Zealand-esque in the way that they capitalised on tries, on moments, on turnovers, the counter-attacking, the storyline around James O'Connor. 2008, he makes his debut, hasn't even been in a Wallabies jersey for 3 years, had to go overseas, and thought that moving to the Crusaders was the best way to get back in gold. And I'll tell you what, he has done that. What a shaky start. And then to find his feet just showed the experience of a 35-year-old playing his 65th test. Brilliant. I loved it. The pictures that he saw, initially the rush defence from the Springboks got the better of the Wallabies. They were out-muscling them. They were beating him in the air. And then there was a 15-minute passage between the 61st and 66th minutes where they got on the outside on 4 occasions, and it was through cutout passes, generally speaking, and they got over the top of the wingers. The outside centres got exposed. It was marvellous from the Wallabies. And you go through the side from 1 to 23, no one's had a bad game.
No.
It was just brilliant. And to do it altitude, what is it, 1,720 metres above sea level, in front of 60,000. The memes that have been doing the rounds just sums it up. The Box thought that they were in for a party and for a show, and it was as flat as a tack by full time.
Well, they were crying into their clippies and collar, I think, at full time. Weren't they there?
What wasn't the best response? Michael Atkinson from Stan asked Joe Schmidt at the end, are you going to be digging into a bit of Castle Lager there? And Joe Schmidt, New Zealander, of course, said, I think I'll have to go something a bit more Australian than that. I loved it. Everyone would drink to that kind of message, and it's exactly what the Wallabies, the Aussie public needs. And to build on the back of the performance in Sydney, but I think it's 3 games, isn't it?
Yeah,
in Melbourne. It's not just a one-off. It's not a fluke. It was marvellous.
There would have been a lot of Australian fans out there after 22 minutes. My little brother among them, who said, I've seen this nightmare too many times before. Sleep is too precious on a Saturday night. I want to start my Sunday morning at least refreshed. Who, threw the towel in after the first quarter and said, look, I don't want to put myself through this again. And then only to wake up a few hours later, maybe their WhatsApp groups light up, whether you go to Twitter or Facebook, or you've got messages from friends and family, whatever it is, to be stunned to seeing that result. I think a lot of people went and, fired up the mini to start with, and then saw that and said, well, I've got to watch the entire game. I did that twice on Sunday. First time around, I had the little fella crawling all over me. So while he was sleeping at lunchtime, went through it again. And it was hard not to just be caught up in that opening stanza and go, well, look, I can't see a way back for this team from here. Everything we know about South Africans playing at home, as I said, the Wallabies, how they can further deteriorate, fall in an even deeper hole. But something tweaked, didn't it? They just got on the board, and it was O'Connor, that offload to Len Ikitau. Firstly, Len recognising that's where the space was, good flat pass. O'Connor pokes his head through, gets an arm free to scramble that offload, and Dylan Peach finishes it off, getting the second touch from Len Ikitau that is so important. So that just halted the Springboks momentum, and then they capitulated, really, didn't they? They went away, probably tried to play too much rugby and got carried away with, maybe the Tony Brown effect that this team has, undergone since the great Kiwi coach has come over there and added certainly dimensions to their attack. They went away from what is the essence of Springbok rugby, set piece, high balls, tackle hard, run hard, win set piece, and win your rucks and balls. And that kind of just opened the door up increasingly for the Wallabies, didn't it? And they took their opportunities from there.
Certainly did. Manny Lebok was exposed. It was almost Australian and esque of overplaying your hand, right? That the Springboks were guilty and surprisingly guilty of overplaying their hand. To be 22 up, and even at 22-12, there were so many opportunities in that second half for them to poke their noses further in front, to seal the deal, to put the final nail on the coffin of the Wallabies there. But the last ditch defence, you could go through and say probably 4 or 5 players made desperate, almost one-handed, one-armed tackles to bring them down. Max Jorgensen really stood out in that respect. The work from Fraser McWright, who was totally right to get the player of the match, to have 2 clean stills, and then also a third breakdown penalty win was immense.
From the side, yeah.
Tom Hooper got compared to George Smith at that moment.
That, for me, if the Springboks score there, that's game over, even with that Wallabies revival. Tom Hooper's play there for the second test running, huge.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then we saw the Manny Lebok attempted cutout pass, and if he nails it, if it gets past Suwali, it's game set match there, and he takes it. He recognised he was starting to push some passes there, and then even later on when they're chasing the game, Damien Willemser running like a crash ball, kind of the sort of run that your back rower, your Marco van Staden would run, and he's running it, tight into the defence, and he drops it into the teeth, and you could see Rassie Erasmus at that time going, this is not where you put your 10/15 in to run that line at that moment. And it was no surprise that he dropped the ball. It was the wrong option, but these guys don't have an answer. They didn't have a Andre Pollard on the bench there to flip it around. And we've seen over the last couple of years that even though Lebok's got so much skill, at times the conservative nature of rugby can win out. It is the right option to keep doing it time and time again. To me, the turning point came around midway through when Van Staden goes off the field and Quagga Smith comes on, and he's so hard on the ball always. And Lebok doesn't roll away, and he gets pinged, even though Quagga Smith had hands on the ball, would have won the penalty. Lebok didn't go east to west. He went north to south, and he got pinged, and that's a Ben O'Keefe sort of thing. If you get in the channel, even though I don't think he really impacted it much, he showed the picture and he got pinged, and it's what Ben O'Keefe always pings you about. Absolutely. So it was that I think was the turning point. And then shortly after, with that try to make it 22-5, it comes off the back of having advantage there. The Springboks discipline was woeful. 10 penalties to 4. What the Wallabies, I think it's the biggest turnaround of all under the Wallabies, under Joe Schmidt's coaching environment, is the fact that they are now a very, very disciplined team, and it's just not allowing cheap entries into 22s.
Well, they're an accurate team first, Christy. We go back. The game that sticks out for me at the end of the Dave Rennie era, where they really should have beaten Ireland in Dublin, I think had the lead at halftime, but also there was 4 neck roll penalties that they gave away in one half of rugby at the Aviva. And you're thinking to yourself, this team just isn't learning from their mistakes. Like, there's no progression here. And the discipline issues were at the heart of that. And as you say, you fast forward on now 3 years to have go away and concede, only that amount of penalties in South Africa is huge. And then force the Springboks into making, some being inaccurate on their side of the ball, both in attack and defence. And it's chalk and cheese to turn around.
To dig in deeper there, I've got a couple of things that I've picked up, and I'm interested in what you've seen as well. To me, physically, they're matching sides.
Yep.
Firstly, like we've seen it against the Lions. Like when you're getting overpowered, you generally concede. You put hands in the ruck that you don't necessarily want to, and you get caught at the offside line, and certainly at set piece. The rising physicality of guys like obviously Skelton's there, but Tom Hooper, as a 24-year-old now, has just had a massive rapid growth of development, and he is now not just a boy, he's a man, and you can see that on the field.
And Nick Frost as well, who we
Totally.
were critical of the back end of the Super Rugby season for kind of making soap tackles. The transformation in his game through the Lions series onto the weekend has been incredible.
And maybe it's guys timing their runs. I think you should become Super Rugby finals. You should be there focused, but it doesn't always happen to switch overnight. Like guys like Martin Nolan didn't always fire throughout Super Rugby, but come test, you put the All Blacks jersey on, and he's a world-class player. The other thing that I've noticed is that their breakdown pressure, like it's always been a hallmark of Joe Schmidt, really rapid speed of ruck delivery and speed. Their decision-making around when to go into the breakdown has been brilliant. On the weekend, you saw several times, rather than throwing the extra guy in there to potentially give away hands in the ruck or just to annoy someone and then the referee gets on the wrong side, they're just either going there to win the turnover or they're staying away. And there's so many examples to be able to point out throughout that game. And I think they're the two big ones.
And having a bit of extra leadership on the weekend at 22-0 down, as we said, you're standing behind your post and you're thinking, goodness, how are we going to get ourselves out of this? And I think, despite him not being given the captaincy full-time yet, Harry Wilson, or on an official permanent basis, if you like, has got to take a lot of credit for that. Having Skelton back in there now, hearing maybe he may be hanging around for a little bit longer, potentially at least he's going to come back to Australia before going back to France.
I asked him that.
Conversation, it was your question, a conversation to be had, which is kind of updated again. So we'll come back to him again shortly. But and even James O'Connor, like at 35 years of age. And, we were talking about it midway through Super Rugby that we felt that he had to be at least within as part of this Wallabies environment, not necessarily in the match day 23. I think after Lolasio's injury, we called it fly half insurance. Well, it's more than insurance. Sure, it was a shaky enough start there. He took a little while, like, the entire Wallabies team, to find his feet. But I mean, that pass to Jorgo at the finish there, beautiful cutout. And there was a moment in the first half when they were just going backwards. He just drifted to the blind and just put a kick in behind. It was nearly a 50-22. It wasn't, but it was just a mature play, I thought, at that moment. To put the ball out, say, guys, we're not going anywhere. We just need to just settle things down a bit. I don't think I've seen an Australian 10 kind of play with that poise for quite some time.
I recognise that exact moment. 15-0 the Boks were up at that time. So they conceded another try shortly after, but it was a moment to catch your breath and just go, guys, like, let's go to set piece, start again and work our way back into it. And even in the 80th minute, like unassailable lead, 38-22, clearly the Boks is stuffed up by not getting the ball past the 10-metre line and get a scrum. And clearly 50-22, they could have scored again, and it would have been a well-crafted, taken try there. BPA very, very close to getting over in the end. But you're right, the maturity there was just a 10 going, you know what, I've seen this before, and this is how you change the momentum and tempo of a game. And that's what the Boks just couldn't do. And without having Pollard on the bench, they went in with Moody, didn't they? The 20 and Damien Villeneuve, two guys who are very, very talented. World Cup winners, but not necessarily the ice cool 10 that was the insurance policy for the Springboks during the World Cup. You got to remember Lebok, was struggling in the quarter and in the semi-final and got subbed at about that 33-minute mark or so. And the test changed as soon as Pollard came on. Like, it's the clearest example that experience matters, and we've seen it yet again on the weekend.
Not to say that the Boks, that first 15 minutes, they were extraordinary. What were they in over the line after 90 seconds or whatever it was? And, right then you thought, oh my God, how's this going to finish up here today? But, Etzebeth, he was very strong early doors. But you're right, you're thinking across that Wallabies team over who was outplayed by their opposite across the 80 minutes. And, you'd be hard-pressed to say, okay, yeah, that Springbok won that individual battle.
I'm trying to think right now, and I can't say emphatically anyway. Like, the scrum, I think the Springboks won the scrum battle.
They had,
but it wasn't domination in that area. The Wallabies mainly won their ball from anyway.
Yep.
I think they did on every occasion. And it was just one or two times where the Springboks had advantage and they just didn't make the most of it when they did start to get some ascendancy in the second half. So a really great performance. You know, you've already mentioned Frosty with the line out. There was a shaky period, wasn't there, with Billy Pollard, where his line out got picked off twice. The first one close to the line probably wasn't the right call. And I even thought at the time, if you take 3 to convert a try behind, but maybe it was the momentum of the game, the feel of it. It wasn't a clear-cut decision to take the 3 points there, even though I think it might have been the right call. But they responded really, really well, even after losing those couple of line outs. So Harry Wilson, you might continue to debate whether or not he should be the captain if it's a fully fit side, but he had a brilliant performance. 2 tries. The short ball from Angus Bell, like that was pleasing to see. I know that Slipper has a HIA, concussion, comes off, concussion symptoms that he got. So that's why Bell came on at the 40-minute mark. But it was the right decision, wasn't it? Either way, to have him in there. And that ball, you know, that ball, any 10 in the world is pretty happy with that, aren't they?
Certainly we will have been. And Bell, like back to his ball carrying best that we saw, you know, the last couple of years. Probably didn't see it a lot during the Lions series off the bench. But you think back to last year at Twickenham, where he was, you know, outstanding in that win over England. His impact off the bench at Ellis Park on the weekend was first rate. He, you know, palming off Malcolm Marks with ease and then, you know, dancing around a couple of other defenders. Great to see him back to his best. I mean, you could praise the entire team, but you got to look at a couple of guys in particular. And I mean, Max Jorgensen, Christy, if he's not world class already through, 8 tests, he's certainly on the cusp of it because Marty Libok, again, unfortunately, he made him look incredibly silly, didn't he? Just putting a move on and going around him. They call it in the NBA an ankle breaker, and that's exactly what it was when players get put on skates and they go the other direction. And look, he's earning rave reviews all around the world, and rightly so, because I not only think he's going to be a generational player for the Wallabies, but I think he could be an all-time great winger of world rugby.
Hard to disagree with it at the moment. I completely agree. Like everything that he's done looks brilliant. And I've written today around, you know, the 5 things column. You think about some of the punts that Eddie Jones took in 2023. He obviously got so much wrong during that campaign, but the talent identification wasn't necessarily one of them. Maybe he got thrown in too early, but I think he had made the decision that some guys need this development so that in 3 to 4 years' time, they are absolutely world class and that they can make that impact at the 27 World Cup. I could see the justification around some of those guys, and one of them being Max Jorgensen, Tom Hooper, another. You know, you even saw Ben Donaldson get an opportunity. Yep. Maybe he shouldn't have at the time, but Hooper made his debut in the corresponding fixture in 23 in Pretoria, just, you know, down the road almost from Joburg, and it was a baptism of fire for him. And then we've seen later on Jorgo go to that World Cup and make his debut a year later after another injury setback, and he just, everything he does makes it look so easy. He's the Will Jordan at the moment of the Wallabies.
Well, that's the comparison I was going to make. We don't know about Will Jordan's extraordinary strike rate. That's just about a try test match. Jorgo's not quite there at that stage, but I mean, look, if he keeps playing like he is, surely he's got the Australian, you know, try scoring record, you know, at some point in the future, and he's hoping he stays in the game. I'm sure the Roosters will have a ginormous crack at him, R360 as well. All these, you know, various potential options in the air. But look, I think whatever this is a winning team, and this was an interesting point that, you know, Paul Cully made today in the Herald around, you know, if you mark Nwanganita-Wasi, a guy who's made pretty much every poster winner in rugby league with the Roosters this year, you're seeing those scenes on the sidelines of, you know, Will Skelton and Taniela Tupou, you know, hugging each other, jumping into the air, the celebrations there at full time when Tom Wright runs away to ice the match. And even though they went very nearly close to scoring through BPA there at the finish by a blade of grass or two, just couldn't get the ball down. That if you're seeing scenes like that and thinking, my goodness, that looks like a team that I want to be a part of.
Well, it's the thing that rugby has over rugby league. It is an international game, and we're seeing at the moment the Wallabies are getting increasingly closer to being back. And when that happens, it's a good field nature. You're not just winning it at 35, 40%. If you start flipping that and win at 60%, then geez, all of a sudden you've got a team, you've got a nation that is going to rally behind you. And every time the Wallabies win, the nation wants to follow, don't they? So about backing it up, Mark Nawangituasi, I saw him on Saturday, actually. I went down to Shoot Shield, East and Randwick, their local derby, and Mark was there alongside.
He stayed engaged in the game despite playing another code.
There was half a dozen Roosters players down there, and Mark certainly was, and he was enjoying a drink post, the Roosters getting up on Friday night. But why wouldn't you be looking at it? And I think R360, if we just pivot for the slightest of seconds, it's a way to potentially engage more people outside of the hardcore rugby circles, that it is going to be attacking some of the NRL players. Rugby Australia is not going to have the budgets to be able to bring everyone back. So is there a way that they go there, you're paid elsewhere, and you can still be selected by the Wallabies, of course. So, yeah, I'm most pleased for people like Will Skelton. Will Skelton comes back more often than not, answers the call. He's answered the call recently. Nick White too, and a guy that had publicly hung it up. And I know of a lot of people going, geez, this is messy. Like, you just announced the retirement and he's back and he's starting like a week later. But these guys have gone through the dark times and they're seeing some very, very good times at the moment. And it's brilliant.
Well, let's talk a little bit more around Will Skelton. I think continuity has been massive. That's now 3 tests on the bump. He started in Melbourne, Sydney, and now away in Johannesburg. Had that calf injury that is still, suffered at the same time as Rob Valentini, who we think could play this weekend potentially if Harry Wilson is out. He certainly travelled with the squad, so that's got to be a positive sign, and you might have an update for us on that one. But having back-to-back games now for the Wallabies, Will Skelton, we know his World Cup campaign was derailed again by a calf injury. He's flying back. He said as we mentioned earlier, he will fly back with the team. We had suspicions he might go straight back north from Africa after this week's game in Cape Town. But and just those scenes again at full time, how much he is enjoying himself as a part of this Joe Schmidt Wallabies environment, finally getting some of the success that his talent, his experience and what he's done in the game probably has deserved at international level. Sure, we made the point the other week around that it's a bit of a crime. He's only played 35 tests and a missed opportunity, no doubt. But fantastic that he's now there, wants to be part of this team, and is prepared to just say to La Rochelle, can we work something out here?
Yeah, and I don't know if he's really ever played more than 4 tests straight, right? Like he's now... Well, it's going to be 3, isn't it? But he's been around for a long, long time, which is good because he generally is either coming on the end of year spring tours and it's just not necessarily worked. It takes a couple of tests and at least a few weeks to get up and running. Yeah, he and James O'Connor were on a press conference with some of the Aussie journos on Sunday evening, and there was a couple of interesting themes that came through, and everyone, and they all talk about belief. Yeah, there's great belief in this current group, and it's just the stock standard of response you hear all the time. And I asked him, is there actually any difference between this kind of belief and the belief of the past? And he said, no, not really. Like, you're always going to have belief. But I managed to get in a quick question before because they only ever have 10, 15 minutes before they're hurried away. And I said, look, are you likely to come back to Australia? And, I don't even think I necessarily asked around the Rugby Championship, but he said, yes, I will be, but there's still discussions to be had regarding whether or not I play. So you're right, it is an ongoing kind of moving feast, this one, isn't it? Whether or not he can play. Can he play this whole Rugby Championship with the All Blacks tests as well? Like, that's a long stint to be away, and I think you do start to just push it a little bit if you go into October. So fingers crossed he's around because he can be the difference between perhaps being in a Bledisloe Cup and maybe challenging for it and perhaps not.
Indeed. Watch this space. Probably get some more clarity around that after this second test in Cape Town. Let's look ahead to that now, Christy. Some injuries, obviously. The Wallabies have already made some announcements. Dylan Peach and James Slipper travelling home. In have come Filippo Daugunu and Reece Van Neck, who, has been pretty solid off the bench for the Brumbies the last couple of years. I think it's a good opportunity to bring him into the broader squad, at least to give him a taste of the environment and school up on what's going on under the Joe Schmidt, in the Joe Schmidt Wallabies You're right. And then Harry Wilson didn't look great post-game, did it? He was on crutches here on the sideline. We got the update from Wallabies spokesperson a bit later on saying he's back at the hotel walking unassisted. I think he made some comments himself around, hopefully not too bad. As I said, didn't look great, looked kind of jerky, and your mind goes, was that an ACL, a non-contact ACL, which can happen.
Timmy Hura said it in the commentary box before, kind of,
walking it back, maybe just a medial bit of meniscus damage, who knows? But we should get an update on that, you would think, probably in the next few hours. We're recording this Monday lunchtime. There'll have to be some changes there. But, Valentini, the fact that he travelled, I don't know if you've got more info. Is that a good sign that he's pretty close to being ready to go?
Yeah, look, it's a funny one. I haven't actually specifically asked around that just yet. I get the hunch he'll be, if he's travelled, unless he's retweaked it, which would mean he's probably heading back. He was on the commentary on Saturday, wasn't he, on Sunday morning, Australian Eastern. I get the feeling he comes back. To me, this is I don't expect you to see Van Neck or Daungunu take part this week unless there's another injury. This is the perfect opportunity to test depth. Usually Rugby Australia and the Wallabies don't have the opportunity to do that because you're chasing your wins. You're chasing every win to kind of stay in the game. Right now, they can potentially, I think, test some depth and not actually, give the test away. Like the chances of going back to back in South Africa are probably, remote. Like they're about $6 outsiders now. Like it's come back from being $10 and just being completely written off. But we know that Cheslin Colby's coming back for the Box. Damien Diolande is likely to come back. They're going to probably strengthen their team slightly. I think guys like Corey Toole, who's been in and around the squad for a year, he should get an opportunity. Whether or not he starts or on the bench, I think he should. There's obviously a position there with Peachy going back. Hunter Paisami's been there for the last 5 tests, hasn't got that opportunity yet. I think he deserves one now. Clearly, Rob Valentini for Harry Wilson, if he's not 100%. The benefit you get is you keep everyone happy.
Yep.
And these guys have really been knocking on the door. It's not like it's you're swapping a world-class player to a club guy. Like there's not too much of a gap between some of these guys. So I think you can keep everyone happy, change the picture by bringing in a Paisami for an Ikitau, for instance, who he's already played, 5 tests. He looked like he hurt his knee a little bit. Yeah. Whether it was a gash or not remains to be seen. Like, this is the perfect chance. Like, even a Tane Edmund, give him a crack 45 minutes and then swap him out for an O'Connor who likes that finishing role himself. It just gives you some more wriggle room going forward, because we've got to remember there is that many tests remaining in this year. You can't expect a Fraser McWright to go through and play every single test. So I think Carlo Giussano would be a perfect moment.
Probably a game tailor-made for Carlo.
Just like we know how physical all these games are, the taxing international toll. Like McWright's got a long role to play ahead. So this isn't about dropping guys. This is about testing and management and going, we've got a big couple of tests against Argentina and you need to win those games. You need to challenge the All Blacks. So there's no point breaking these guys right now. The other one is you're starting Bellick, surely, for Slivs, and then I'd like to see an Aiden Ross come into the mix as well. I think he's a really solid option who's been hardened from 100 games in Super Rugby for a top-tier New Zealand team.
Yeah, of course, was available in July, has moved from the Chiefs, signed with the Reds for next season, has been in with the squad now for about a month. So watch this space on that front.
What would you do?
Well, I was on the record last week, Christy. I said throw everything at this first test, and I'm glad that they have, and they've got the win. Did I think they were going to win it? No, and happy to cop humble pie, and just to be so happy with what they've done last weekend to get the result. But look, I think there's absolute merit in what you've said there around management. Those 2 big games to come against Argentina, quite often we know, even with that week off, coming back from South Africa is a really tricky test. We've seen it worry the Wallabies previously after travelling over to the Republic. So I think you got to be smart, and I think, Joe Schmidt, for the most part, has been smart this season. Maybe not bringing in James O'Connor as early as you and I had potentially called for, and I'm going to ask you a question on a column of yours shortly, which generated a bit of feedback late last week on the Raw. But, yeah, is it one for Corey Toole? I don't know. Maybe I might hold back on that one, but I see merit in Hunter Paisami. These guys in particular who've played 3 dogged tests against the Lions, have now travelled to South Africa and had to work their way back at altitude. And comments just briefly on James O'Connor's I found fascinating, Christy, around the speed of Super Rugby this year and how he felt that was going to leave the Wallabies in such a good position. And as I think everyone has noted, they finished well and truly over the Springboks. I mean, the South Africans now, happy to wave goodbye to Super Rugby in the rearview mirror. But I found those comments from James O'Connor fascinating.
Completely agree, actually. And it's almost like when you're sitting on a presser when someone says that, it's just like, oh, ping, like, yeah, really good point, that. And there's a reason why every World Cup bar one has been won by Southern Hemisphere sides, the big three nations in the South. And it was a really good point, that just around the speed there. So we know that the South Africans, were booted out essentially by the Kiwis. And they haven't really featured at the pointy ends of European or Champions Cup since that's been expanded to include South Africa as well. So they're having to always travel across in the URC too. So it was a really good point, that. The other player, Lukan Salakai-Lota, here's an opportunity to
sure.
He's got a bee in his bonnet, let him rip and test him. Like, the public wants to see him. He wants to play. We'll find out whether or not it's just words or if he can actually, walk the talk as well. So I'd love to see him. Like, Frosty's in that same category with Fraser. Like, they just can't. Frosty's still young in lock years. Like, he's got to be able to be managed there properly. So I'd love to see maybe a Williams starts and a Salakai-Lota comes off the bench to replace a Skelton. To me, it just seems like a match made in heaven, that.
A word on South Africa, Christy. The fallout will continue in the Republic for the next few days. Rassie Erasmus certainly effusive in his praise of the Wallabies, but at the same time saying that, not only did the players make some mistakes out there, but the coaching team had. And that's often a way of, kind of taking attention off those players. And I'm sure he probably had Manie Libbok in his mind, because he has bore the brunt of a lot of criticism in South Africa in recent years. And, a couple of prominent Twitter folk from the Republic saying that could be the end of Manie Libbok's Test career. That's probably an overreaction, but it'll be a tough spot for him to be in. As you said, Andre Pollard probably comes back in. Sasha Feinberg and Gomazula is obviously the other option as well. But we spoke last week around, how's this? Where are the Boks at in between World Cups there? Rassie's trying to work out which of these old guys are going to get, older guys, I should say, are going to get through to the next World Cup. And certainly Etzebeth still proving that he is truly world-class, the way he was able to get offloads with 3 Wallabies hanging off him. But he will have learned a few things, Rassie, on the weekend. I'm sure we'll see a return to Type A for the Springboks this week. They'll tighten things up. They'll go back to set piece to set piece, play territory, a lot of high balls, particularly if Pollard starts at number 10. But this is, it feels like this is a bigger speed bump for the Springboks than, or maybe a wake-up call of sorts for Rassie and the rest of that squad that, hang on, we've got a few little things to confront here over the next couple of years. Yeah,
it's funny that I don't know if I see it in the same lens.
Okay.
I think they're managing it brilliantly. Like you're saying around which players hang on and which don't.
Indeed.
I completely agree about that. And guys like Sia Khaleesi, who's been publicly on the record saying, I want to get there into 2027. I'm not that old, blah, blah, blah. I just think that, let's remember, it's halfway through that cycle. A new attack coach there in Tony Brown. They've come off the back of a couple of tests to Italy and Georgia. It's not the same caliber.
Which we did wonder, were they underdone?
And we probably saw that. But at the end of the day, I think Joe Schmidt hit the nail on the head with several of his messages and points post-game, which was that they were a bit unlucky and we were a bit lucky. Like, they took their chances. And this is sport, by the way, that every game there's always going to be moments, and it's whoever can take them. It generally comes out on top. But the Boks, for the amount of opportunities they had, they just didn't quite take them. And, the intercepts were perfect examples of that. Like, they're generally, they can be 50-50 scenarios, can't they? But sometimes you can make it into a 66% chance or a 33%. And we just saw that the Wallabies made the right options. The Boks didn't. They pushed a couple of passes. On a different day, Peter Seftotoy's not dropping the ball there at the base of the ruck. And if he scores there, we're talking about the Boks probably going on and to winning that game. So it's a good little wake-up call. It's a good reminder, but I don't actually think...
It's not panic stations by any stretch.
No, not at all. So we will see a response this week. And then they will get the ultimate litmus test when they go to Eden Park in a month or so's time to take on the All Blacks. So,
and what it has done, Christy, it's actually set up this championship, which we were talking around last week. What is the future for the Rugby Championship? Where's it going to be? It's a good piece from Brittany Mitchell last week for us saying, well, maybe it's got to be made going into every 3 or 4 years might make it that little bit more special, potentially have that kind of effect in terms of scarcity of tournament. But this year, as of the first game, it's set up brilliantly.
Well, we said, and you've got to be proactive and decisive when you're a journo. You can't sit back and look through the rearview mirror. Hindsight's a beautiful thing, right? So sometimes you've got to put your balls on the line with things. And one of the things we said was it was shaping up to be the best TRC for a long time. We would see if the Wallabies can back it up, and they have backed it up. So that's why it's brilliant. Finally, the Wallabies have arrived to an extent, and we'll talk about if they're back in a moment, but that they're showing signs of that, aren't they? And that makes the tournament what it is. And in the same way that we expect the Boks to make a comeback of sorts this weekend, I think Argentina will as well. So, yeah, it's the North watch down and they look at Australia right now and they look at the TRC and they go, geez, there's some good rugby here. We better watch out. Like, I know that we always look at the Six Nations like it is on the pedestal, the best tournament outside of a World Cup, and I still think it is. But in terms of players, the athletes that come out of it, the TRC has got some serious talent.
Here's a quick one. Has it made the Lions win in Australia look that little bit better now?
No. It makes the Wallabies should have won this Lions series. This Lions team was not a good team, and the Wallabies missed the jump. And I'll still stand by that. The Lions were not great. And that's why it's frustrating looking at it from my perspective, is that they have so much potential and we're starting to see that shine through.
Fair enough. Well answered. Let's go to your column for the Raw last Friday, mate, which generated, you copped a fair whack of criticism, but as you say in this game, sometimes you got to lead with your chin, and sometimes you'll get it right, and other times people will call you the dumbest rugby scribe on the planet. It's happened to me. It's happened to you. It'll happen to both of us any number of times again. But just talk us through exactly what you wrote around Joe Schmidt, his selection, his management of the number 10s this year, and then also the scenario last week that when Joe, obviously the injury to Ben Donaldson happened late at training. There wasn't any cover named on the bench at that point in time. They then rejigged it after the captain, ahead of the captain's run, I think, saying that, yes, we've now gone to a 5-3 split. Tane Edmed comes onto the bench, ironically doesn't play. I think it's fantastic that James O'Connor was out there for the full 80 because I think he fully deserved to have that moment out in the middle. But talk us through that column, mate, some of the reaction that you've got, and you'll write a reply to those people who have taken a shot at you.
Well, I've almost set it up just a couple of minutes ago, haven't I? But that you have to be on the front foot as a journo, that you can't sit back, because no one wants to just read someone who speaks, that hindsight doesn't exist. So to me, Joe Schmidt corrected it. He made the right decision ultimately. But it's a very odd look when it's on a Thursday and people say, oh, it was a split-second decision. He had to name a 23-person team. Coaches have solutions, backup plans all the time. They have to think about it. What's the scenario if such and such person goes down? And if you're the Wallabies recently, you've had to do this in a weekly occurrence. What is the backup? So we saw the Thursday, another hooker go down before the third test in Sydney, and they had a ready-made solution there. Pollard started, etc. To go in with a change from a 5-3 to a 6-2 to name that, to have a champion decrepity, it just seemed messy. It was like, what are we doing here? Like, everyone knows that you need a backup 10. And when you're on a press conference and you're hearing the language that was being used around that, Joe Schmidt didn't start the presser by saying, at his team announcement, by saying, by the way, guys, Ben Donaldson's gone down. We've named a 23. We still might tweak it. We're still weighing up the merits of a 6-2, 5-3, but this is what we've done. No, he's named a 6-2 with Nick Champion Decrepney, a loose forward who's unproven, really, one test, ahead of a backup 10, which everyone knows. And the solutions he was offering were Nick White, who's never played a game at 10 at professional rugby, and Andrew Kellaway. So it was head-scratching, to say the least, and he got probed a little bit more and was talking about Hunter Paisami's, played 10 as an under-20s player. And he didn't even make mention of Tane Edmund at that point in time. It took thankfully, the very last question, because the whole presser had been done in South Africa with 2 or 3 questions allowed from the Aussies at the end. And thankfully, a third question was allowed around, hang on, might you still look at Taine Edmund here being the backup 10 still in the squad? And Joe Schmidt eventually, and I say reluctantly, he didn't name him to begin with, said Taine Edmund. Yeah, he is, and we'll probably make a decision as to whether or not the merits are over the next day or so. So it was just odd. Like, you're playing games here a little bit to an extent. And if you're not, I just don't think a 6-2 was the right call. Now, as it turned out, he made the decision, tweaked it, brilliant. But it was just very odd at the time. And we had to, at the time, report in a way that that at the time it was still a 6-2, wasn't it? So had he gone through with that, had there been an injury like what there's been in recent months when we lost Harry Potter, wasn't it, for that 6-2 split for the Melbourne Test, or when Eddie Jones lost Lenny Kittel when he went in for a 6-2 against Argentina and it backfires, then you go, oh, all of a sudden. And then the journo comes out on the Monday and slams, Joe Schmidt for what he was doing. So you've got to be ahead of it. And look, some journos don't like criticism. For me, you've got to have opinion. You've got to come out strong. I don't like vanilla. I like thinking that we're a game's won and lost. And to me, we saw on the weekend, Marnie Lebok, Rassie Erasmus probably lost that test because he couldn't change the momentum of the game by replacing Marnie Lebok because he didn't have that backup 10 that he really wanted. Williams here came on, he's played a bit, but he's mainly a fullback. Thankfully, the Wallabies had a 10 that got better throughout the game and they didn't have to change the momentum. But no stress on my end with whatever people want to say.
Well, I got once told to go and report on effing marbles back earlier in my career, mate, so that remains a personal highlight for me. Well, let's be black and white then around, as I said, we had a bit of fun on ESPN this morning getting people coming into our office here in Sydney around whether rugby was back. Some of them, I think, had no idea about the result, as you would fully expect. Across various sales and ad ops departments, a couple of very passionate rugby fans among them, a couple of rugby league fans among them who took great delight in saying, what's that? Oh, rugby league. Yeah. But, mate, I think when you stack up the results now, of course, the proof will be in the pudding if they can back it up. And, I don't expect them to win this week because I think the Boks will be just absolutely jumping out of their skins to atone for the weekend. But you stack up a win in Argentina, a win away at Twickenham in dramatic fashion. Probably we should have won the game in Melbourne, win in Sydney. Now this one, I've seen enough now to the team has officially turned the corner and is going somewhere.
So you're saying they're back?
They're back.
Sean Maloney said it, didn't he? He said it on the weekend. The Wallabies are back. 2 weeks earlier, I know that the Between Two Posts guys debated whether or not they were back, and they settled on they probably have to do it more consistently for that to occur. I'm more on that camp. If the Wallabies have to win 4 TRC games, in my opinion, to be back, because unless that, it's only 50%. And if you're winning 50% of your tests, that's more or less what's happened in Australian rugby for the last 10 years. So I agree they have turned the corner, but turning the corner and then winning regularly is a different thing. So I want to see them win 4 tests throughout this TRC, if that's the case. 3 are the bare minimum right now. It's at least the 2 Argentina games.
Yep.
I think you need to beat an All Black side. For me, that'll be saying that you're back. It hasn't happened for a 2-test series, since probably the 2019 TRC, which is the truncated one there. I think it'll be difficult this weekend, but you can still win at least 2 of the next 4 and hopefully 3.
Fair enough. Assessment as well. Campo, we mentioned him earlier. We spoke about him last week, thanks to the question from Pete Crossman.
It was timely, that, from Pete.
It was. He's seen the future, sort of an oracle type figure, Pete. Well done to you. He led with his chin last week as well, Campo, as Campo has done virtually since day dot, exactly how he played. Joe Schmidt has no idea was basically the genesis, the circle of his comments surrounding Joe. I can see why he's never won a World Cup. And then came out this morning with his usual Planet Rugby column saying I had to eat humble pie and I'm enjoying it because I was, proven wrong. And this was a brilliant win by a team that, fair play to Campo. They played brilliantly on the counter. They took their opportunities. and scored some absolute worldy tries at the same time. He's then fronted up to our good mate at the Herald, Tommy Decent, this morning, saying similar things, but then also saying I'm not going to say any more because, any time I say anything, and if, people have been slamming, reaching out to Campo's family or anything like that, then that is absolutely beyond the pale, and that should not happen anywhere, anytime, no matter the individual sport or whatever. But Campo, look, was he the genesis of it? Pete Fitzsimons in the Herald as well, writing around, well, Campo, can you do that more often? Because it clearly had an effect. Who knows? I doubt that would have been brought up in Wallabies camp. But, that's Campo, isn't it? And I wonder whether we'll see him continue in that vein. You'd have to think, even with that, if he's got this ongoing spot with Planet Rugby, that more of it.
Yeah, I think he probably will, and he might not next weekend, but it's there. It's Campo. And people have gone, why are you giving him a platform? We've got to remember this is one of the great
all-time
players.
Greats.
And a World Cup winner, Grand Slam winner, beating the All Blacks. So you have to go, like when someone speaks, you've got to take notice. And even though I thought it was ridiculous what he was saying, like a lot of people were two things around that. He took a screenshot of my of my story when I revealed that James O'Connor. So I kept on getting tagged and kind of everything. And Will Carling's putting it up there and going, I hope you're eating humble pie, blah, blah, blah. And my bloody mug is in the shot. But they were saying, I hope you're having breakfast with Campo, being on Sunday morning off the back of my column on the Friday, and then here's a day early. The difference was he was saying he's clueless. He can't rugby coach. We've seen I think there's been some selections that I've questioned and saying maybe some of the messaging. Joe Schmidt is an outstanding coach. Tactically, he is brilliant. And there's always going to be a shelf life with coaches, right? Before, and we saw it with Ireland, there was a bit of unrest in that 2019 campaign with people saying it had gone stale, but he'd been there for 6 years or so. So he can coach. He's brilliant. The Wallabies have definitely turned the corner. They're a much smarter team around all areas of the game. They're a more lethal, threatening side. It's pleasing to watch, and made this kind of long continue. But coming back to Campo for a second, it's good to have characters in the game.
100%.
And without it, it'd be so boring. I know that wouldn't allow us to write and talk about the things that we do. So it was stupid what he had said, but it was kind of, it added to a bit. Like half the coaches around the world are going to use that as material, as ammunition to go, let's prove that bloke wrong.
Indeed. Anyway, that's Campo for 2 weeks running. I wonder if it'll be 3 this time next week. Mate, anything else from that game off the top of your head? I think we've done a pretty good job of wrapping it all up. Covered the injuries, the changes. Will we miss anything?
Look, I don't think so. But you should be proud about rugby, and the game needs. Australian rugby fans need to continue to lean into things, and that's the pleasing thing, that we've seen this little resurgence, and hopefully it continues. Like there's a Women's World Cup that's around the corner as well. It's another opportunity to lean into rugby, to see what it's all about. So that's exciting in itself. We've probably got to discuss a little bit the All Blacks, because ultimately Australians compare themselves to New Zealand. Can you win the Bledisloe Cup? Obviously, it's been since 2002. They're looking all right. They're getting better, aren't they? And it's a big win in the end against Argentina. But I'll tell you what, I think it was 31-24 at the time.
7 points in it, just, yeah.
And there's a yellow card. I think it was Proctor. It was multiple infringements. It probably took a little bit too long for me to go to the pocket for the All Blacks at the time. But there was an opportunity for Argentina to seal the deal there. They didn't. Samisoni Tokiaho with a couple of tries there to blow out the score, but also well-taken ones. Same old issues with Argentina around set piece. Like they're not really a set piece side these days.
No.
They're so strong on the ball, defensively very, very, very good. But yeah, the All Blacks, they're in the same way of South Africa, just finding their feet halfway through this World Cup cycle. The All Blacks are very much the same, I think.
Again, some concerns for them while they managed to recover and get the job done, 41-24. In the end, that, as you said, got back to 7 points there in the second half, and that was the issue for them last year, that they would fall, particularly in that final quarter, into a real hole where they were in games, particularly those 2 away in South Africa, their home defeat against Argentina, and then I think even France at the end of year as well, that they weren't getting the injection, the energy off the bench. And even, I think it was Richard Nola for stuff.co.nz today, making that comment again that, a couple of individuals had their moments, but collectively the energy, the real upturn in performance and that change of momentum, if you like, that you want to get from your replacements just wasn't there once more. We know they've got brilliant starting players in that side. Will Jordan, again, setting up cutting through off the right, setting up Cortez Ratamura. And the fact that they did get out to such a healthy lead and then allowed the Pumas back into it, that'll be just a little bit of a concern for Scott Robertson and the rest of that All Blacks coaching staff.
Yeah, and for them, it's selection at the moment. People were debating Rico Ioane. In the same way, can some of the box players get through to the next World Cup? What's Ioane doing? He's gone back to the wing, and he doesn't look like the winger that he was 6-7 years ago when he burst onto the scene. So, Proctor's at 13 there at the moment. Anton Leonard-Brown came on off the bench, didn't quite set the world alight, clearly got yellow carded in the end for that high shot too. So they've got some selection decisions to make. They've just started Duplessis, Karifi at 7, Dalton Papali still playing NPC. They had Tupou Vite playing at 6 on the weekend too. So it's interesting just seeing how they're moving and progressing through this period. I think they're going to be well placed. They'll get better. They've still got the embarrassment of riches at 10 there, but their midfield mix and their back three outside of Jordan's just fascinating. Like Will Jordan is he's the glue of that side and keeping them together. But they're kind of relying on him more than you would imagine.
And really looking forward to the return of Wallace Satiti, who virtually missed, was it all the Super Rugby? Did he come back?
He came back in the last month.
The last couple of rounds. And then suffered another injury. Didn't face France at all. And not sure if he's in Argentina or he stayed at home.
He's still out. Yeah, until Pilato being ruled out, he got taken to hospital after that game as well. So he's not going to likely to play this weekend either. And he made a really telling contribution off the bench too. So experience.
So, yes, anyway, it should be a fascinating encounter. I think they're down the road to Buenos Aires in Argentina. I say down the road. My Argentine geography, Christie's, and what it should be. It could be up the road.
We'll need Liam Napier. He's over there.
He is, yes. Hello, Napes, if you're tuning in. So, yes, another one to enjoy Sunday morning. Who knows whether it'll be amid some more Wallabies ecstasy. Just quickly to wrap up, Wallaroos get there, or the Women's Rugby World Cup kicks off up in England this weekend. I think Friday night, Aussie time, it gets underway. Look, as we said last week, England red hot favourites at home, been the dominant team now since the past World Cup. With Canada probably best place to beat them. The Black Ferns are always going to be in there, near and about. And the Wallaroos girls we spoke about, Wallaroos women, we spoke about Charlotte Caslick missing last week. Was some vision of her getting back to a little bit of work just next door here at Rugby HQ, which was good to see. Could she be a late injury replacement? The Australians begin their campaign against Samoa, I think, Saturday night.
9 p.m.
Salford Community Stadium, potentially. But, good time zone for that one to watch. Maybe just, watch that one on the couch, fall asleep, and then get up and go again. But, a real, test for this Australian team. We know Joe Yap's time as coach of this team is coming to an end. Still waiting to hear who will replace her in the run down here to pick up the Wallaroos job for the run to 2029. But you just like to see them improve from where they have been. We saw them, hang in with the Black Ferns a little bit more previously than they have certainly last year in their 2 O'Reilly Cup games this year, beat the US. But you want to see them take that next step. And, they've got England in their final pool game, haven't they? So I think they beat them sort of 62-5 in the quarterfinals last time around. So that'll be the first kind of, indication. They'll need to beat the USA, obviously, and Samoa to advance into that second round, into the quarters from there. But that game against England will be really the litmus test of where they're at early in this tournament.
Yeah, well, I think even just the US, like they should be way too good for Samoa this week, and it will hopefully give them confidence. We need them to get through injury unscathed, and that's the big one, is the depth. It's not there clearly for the women's game at the moment, but they had their welcoming ceremony on Sunday, some good vision up there at the moment. So it's a big kind of test. And it's all about building confidence, working your way through here. But if you've already beaten the US, you should feel confident going into that a week later as well. And that should effectively mean win or lose against England, you make it through to the quarters. But at the same time, you want to throw a punch and be able to land it so you can go into that quarterfinal, probably be against someone like a Canada with some confidence that you can stick with them. They clearly didn't stick with them in Brisbane about 6 weeks ago or so. So they've been well tested. They've already had 6-7 games leading up to this moment. So, yeah, Saturday night, strap yourself in. It's going to be a big one. You're going to have to choose between going to sleep or staying up, and I don't quite know what I'm going to do just yet.
Oh, mate, you better get some kip in between now and then. Thank you very much for making the effort on another wet, cold Sydney day. I wish this rain would piss off, basically, here in the Harbour City, if I can use those words. But we'll bask in the glory of this Wallabies win, this famous Australian win in Johannesburg for a couple of days yet, and then look forward to Cape Town. We better have a tip, or at least what do you think is going to unfold this weekend down in the Cape in South Africa?
Well, before we get there, do you remember last week when you said you signed off going Christy Doran?
Yeah, but you almost walked it back then too, didn't you? Because you tipped the box, but then I gave you the chance and you didn't claim it. Or did you not claim it off air?
Well,
it might have been off air.
I think it was off air.
Okay.
But I think the box will win. But to me, it's just about building here. And I've already said it, building depth. I think Springboks will bounce back, and I think they win by 10 to 12 points. But that's beside the point at this point in time. You want to just have progression. So, yeah, I can't see it, but what a week. That was the best win that I can remember. Famous, the second biggest comeback in Australian rugby history, just behind the Checker one of 2018 in Salter, which was famous. There was no big sprays and shirt fronting, but it was all the sweeter, I think.
Have to agree with that, mate. I think if they can hang within 7 points this week, then that'll be a pretty good result. Fascinating to see how they will go. Australia, and I won't be back this time next week. I'm taking a little break for probably 6 or 7 weeks, mate. I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Brittany Mitchell. I'll be listening eagerly each week. Enjoy that. And, hopefully when I do return, we're talking about, if the Wallabies, there'll be no debate around whether they're back.
I'll tell you, it will be a seamless transition having Brit here in time for the Women's World Cup. But I know that there was a lot of people looking forward to the pod, and you can see it in different forums. People were talking about Aussie rugby. May that continue.
Indeed. Thanks all. Again, hit us up. Hit Christy up. Hit Brittany up. I might even throw in a question or two while I'm away because I'll be listening. I'll have plenty of time sitting around on my hands, I'm sure. Thanks always again. And, what a win. Enjoy. See ya.